Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast. Place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 225, Recognizing the Telltale Signs When It's Time for a Big Change. Well, welcome back to this month, which has been all about self-confidence and how to honor the real you. Last week we talked about shame and guilt, and this week I want to shift it a little bit into something that begins to show up for us when we begin to heal. And that's the need for change. The need for things to be different, for us to do different, and for our life to become different somehow. What I know from years of counseling and coaching is that this seems to bubble up for clients when it's time, when it wants to and when it's supposed to, not necessarily when we would like it to. There can be external triggers or internal ones or both, but what I do know is that when it is time, there's no point in trying to defend against it or run from it, because it's coming. But before we get into that, I want to share that the course is live now and available at a discount for a little while only, so make sure you click the link in the show notes and get in there, because our first live class is this Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. So get in there, get signed up, and get working. The course is Find Your Voice. It's a 12-module intensive self-study. Then there is also the group component. And then you can also add on there some one-on-one coaching with me. I love the support community and the group component piece because I think that's what really helps people change. All right, so how do you know that it's time for a big change in your life? So there are some ways we can kind of figure out that maybe it is time for something to change in our life. One of the first ones, and probably obvious one, is persistent stress and anxiety, like chronic stress. It can really take a toll on your physical and mental health. And if you're constantly feeling overwhelmed and it's affecting your well-being, it's time to consider change. Something has to give. Some boundaries need to be set somewhere. A lot of times, though, the reason why things haven't been tackled yet is because these are big changes that people might have to make. Like they may have to make a big career change or at least not work where they're working because it's becoming too overwhelming and stressful for them. And that's a big upheaval and a change, and that can be scary. There might be a lot of fear about finding another job that you like as much and that's close by and all the things. Health issues. So when you start having health problems that stem from your lifestyle or your work environment, that could be a real signal that it's time to change your habits or surroundings or both, right? Because our surroundings are crucial when it comes to taking care of ourselves. Like who's around you taking care of themselves? That's what I want to ask. How do they support that? Or are they just bringing carry out home every night? That's hard for you to resist. Another area to look is relationship problems. So if your relationships, whether personal or professional, are causing constant stress or chronic stress, maybe not every day, but chronic stress, conflict, or just general unhappiness, it might be time to reevaluate those relationships and make some changes. Now, when I work with people on themselves, this usually begins to happen because when we grow, we outgrow. When we grow, we become healthier. We have better boundaries. We have better self-confidence. We know what healthier looks like. Maybe we've made some changes to our behavior, how we interact with people. Maybe we've become more authentic, more purpose-based, more emotionally honest. And so we're going to require, not just want, but need, people in our life who are like-minded in that regard. It's not going to work otherwise. What you usually see is a lot of conflict when one person has started to grow and the other person just doesn't want to or hasn't. There's a lot of conflict because things can't go back to how they were before. The other thing, too, is when you start working on yourself, you start noticing the unhealthy around you. And you realize that, wow, why did I think that was okay before? Well, because maybe you did, and maybe you didn't love yourself enough, or maybe you just didn't recognize why you were unhappy. So when people start working on themselves, they start raising the bar, is what I call it, for the quality of their relationships, the quality of their work environments, the quality of the community they live in. Another area to look at is lack of growth. Stagnation in your personal professional life can be a really strong indicator that maybe it's time to seek new challenges and opportunities for growth somewhere. Now, this could be someone at work. Maybe they want to go for another certification, go back to school, try doing something else. In personal growth, maybe life has become a little imbalanced and they haven't taken time to read a book, listen to a podcast, get a coach, grab a group, grab a course, right? And start working on themselves and work on things that they haven't looked at yet. Financial struggles are another area. Consistent financial difficulties can really be a sign that you might need to make changes in your career, your financial habits, or maybe your lifestyle so that you can have greater stability, less stress, and maybe start meeting some of the financial goals you've had for a while. What people don't realize is that financial stress, when it's chronic, really takes a toll on not just your physical well-being, like your blood pressure and all of that, but also your mental health. It's a big deal. And I think people don't pay enough attention to how overwhelming and anxiety-provoking that can be and how it kind of sets up like this low-level PTSD for some people. If they're living paycheck to paycheck, they're worried. What if something big happens and I don't have money for that? What if I can't pay my rent? What if the bills get overwhelming? And I'm exhausted being on this treadmill kind of thing. So that's a big area to look at. Maybe you do have enough money and you're not managing as well as you would like to. Or maybe you're in a relationship where maybe your partner doesn't manage it well. Maybe you're giving too much to your kids. There's a lot of different areas we can look at financially. That can go hand in hand, too, with job change. Maybe you need to make more money. Maybe it's a revenue issue. So that would go hand in hand with working on what kind of new job would you want to get, or would you want to look for a promotion? Those kinds of things. Another area is alignment with your values. Now, when people grow, at least the people that I sit with, we talk about their beliefs and their values. We talk about really defining them or redefining them and looking to make sure their life is aligned with what their core values and beliefs are, and they could have changed some of those beliefs. And so maybe it's time to realign their life in what's truly important to them. Maybe they never valued happiness before because they were so busy just functioning and taking care of everybody else. So they want their life to reflect some joy in their life, maybe some relaxation, maybe some adventure. And if your life isn't lining up with your values, you can't feel well. I just don't think we can. I think it's a huge piece for us to look at. Another area is feedback from others. Sometimes good friends, family, or maybe your colleagues give you feedback that you might need to change or improve in certain areas. I want you to really consider their input and evaluate where they're coming from. What are they saying? Are you hearing it from more than one person, like the same content or at least concept or idea? Think about where it's coming from. Think about why these statements make sense. Like maybe your friends are like, you don't seem really happy lately. You seem really stressed all the time. You're often coming down with colds and things, and we're really concerned about you. Are you okay? People who really care about you intuitively know if you're okay or not. And the healthy ones will say it because they love you and they care about you. Also, the people who value taking care of yourself are going to say that to you as well. Loss of interest. Maybe you've lost interest in your previous long-term goals or your aspirations. Maybe you want to reassess those, and that's okay. People get rigid and they think, no, I can't change my 10-year plan. Oh, yes, you can. Of course you can. You can do whatever you want. You're the only one who gets to decide whether it's a good thing or not. Another really big area that I run into often with clients is the trigger of a major life event, like the birth of your child, a significant birthday, right? Especially for women, these can be tricky because there are a lot of societal messages that when you turn 30, when you turn 40, when you turn 50, you're running out of time. There could be a major life achievement, but more often a big loss will trigger this, like loss of a parent, loss of a relationship, loss of a job, or maybe a career. Those can become really big triggers because they make us reflect and look at what really matters, what's around us, and what do we really want. And I also think that we're emotionally raw at those moments, and I think we're more authentic, as opposed to just getting caught up in your day-to-day and getting kind of numbed out and doing your thing and not really thinking about it, or more correctly, feeling about it. Another area is desire for personal growth. Like you really just want to improve. You aren't happy with where you are. You want to become more confident. You want to be happy. You want to be proud of yourself. You want to grow. You want to change. You don't want to be where you are. And that goes hand in hand with feeling trapped or stuck. Feeling like you're in a rut. You're trapped in your current circumstances. You're feeling stuck and you're not sure what to do. This can also coincide with intuition and gut feelings that won't go away. The quiet ones that are persistent. Your gut will tell you when something needs to change. And it will hold on until you follow through. This is not anxiety like, oh my God, we just have to blow everything up and impulsively rearrange everything. No, this is a quiet, persistent tapping on the shoulder. It's kind of like a knowing. Those are some areas that are typical triggers. You may have different ones. You may have several all at once, and that's okay. I feel for you. That's a little overwhelming, but not uncommon. Because what's happening is things are shifting, things are moving with or without you, right? And so it's not crazy for it to show up in different areas at one time. You're like, what is going on here? Well, the universe is trying to tell you, come on, it's time. You may not be ready, but it's time. So let's take Sarah, for example. So Sarah's been working in a corporate job for over 10 years. And she's been really feeling unfulfilled and stressed. She feels like she's on the treadmill. She's really lost her passion for her work. And it used to be her dream job. So this is really hard for her. This is part of her persistent stress and anxiety because she has an internal conflict going on. Here's my dream job, quote unquote, and I ain't happy. What do I do with that? How do I reconcile that? How does she reconcile maybe all the education she's still paying for to get said dream job? All the things, right? And then all of the expectations that go along with it. Maybe she has a mortgage now. Maybe she has bills. Maybe she has other people's expectations. Relationships that she's built in the field. There are a lot of losses here. There's a lot of collateral damage, which oftentimes is the thing that keeps people from changing. They're so worried about all those pieces. So Sarah decided to leave her corporate job and pursue her passion for art, which she had neglected for years. That's a big change. So what she did was she started a part-time art business while working a part-time job to make ends meet, because she still had to pay the bills. Over time, Sarah's art business grew, and she eventually became a successful full-time artist. So what are the lessons that Sarah learned? Well, recognizing the signs of unhappiness and prioritizing her own well-being became crucial. Taking that leap of faith, and that was a leap for her, to pursue her passion really led to a more fulfilling and happier life. Okay, so that was her lesson, to prioritize her well-being over like money and success. Another person is Charles, and Charles was struggling with persistent health issues related to a chronic unhealthy lifestyle. He was always fatigued, he gained weight, he had high stress levels, and his relationships were starting to suffer because he didn't have any energy anymore, and he was often irritable because he didn't feel well. So Charles decided to make a big change in his life by prioritizing his health and his wellness. He begrudgingly started a fitness and nutrition program, which included regular exercise and working out. He also went and sat and talked to someone because he realized that managing his stress was really necessary, and he was eating his feelings, right? He was medicating with carbs all his feelings he didn't want to deal with. So he went and sat with someone to talk about his relationships and his feelings and how to work through them and express them in healthy ways. What was his lesson? Well, Charles learned that taking care of his physical and his mental health actually became a foundation for a healthier life for him. He had more energy, he was more engaged, he was loving himself more, he had better boundaries. A long list of advantages of taking care of ourselves that I don't think we often think about. Another person, Emily, had been in a long-term relationship that had really turned toxic and emotionally draining. She was a frog in warm water. She didn't really realize it at first. But over time, as she started to work on herself and started to talk about the truth with safe people, she recognized that this was not good for her and really started to take its toll. She felt so emotionally trapped. She no longer even recognized her own needs, her own desires. All her dreams had to be put to the wayside to focus on this crazy relationship. Her self-esteem was really eroding and she wasn't happy. I think her health was going to start deteriorating as well. We don't get away with it, guys. It gets us somehow. So what change did Emily make? Well, she decided to end that toxic relationship and prioritize her own well-being. She had to go do some therapy to heal from all that emotional trauma, and it took her a while to regain her self-confidence. But over time, she did that, and she reconnected with her interests and began rebuilding her life. What's the hard lesson that Emily learned? Well, recognizing that her happiness and her emotional health were non-negotiable. Choosing to end an unhealthy relationship and focus on her self-healing was really important. And if she didn't put that first, everything else in her life was going to suffer. So, talking about these case studies illustrates how when we recognize the signs for change and we start to take action, we can lead to some positive transformation in a lot of different areas of our life, whether it's your career, your health, your wellness, your relationships. Each person took the steps to achieve a more fulfilling and happier life by embracing change. It was not easy. Usually, they ended up doing something when they got hit upside the head and they couldn't ignore it anymore. What does Oprah say? First, it starts with little whispers, and we're like, it's all right. Then the voice is like a little louder, like you might want to pay attention to this. We're like, no, I'm good. Then we get screamed at, right? Life is going to show up and show us it ain't okay. You need to make some change. So why don't we? Well, let's talk about that. Well, the obvious one is your comfort zone. People often resist change because they're comfortable in their current situation, even if they are miserable. The familiar is easier to endure than the discomfort of change. That's a perception, guys. That's a perception. It's a belief. And I do think that over the years when I sit with people, they're not going to do that yet, and I know that. So instead we start working on them and them becoming healthier and them recognizing what's healthy versus unhealthy in terms of what's around them. And I think their brain gets enough contrast going that at some point the match gets lit and they're like, oh my God, I got to do this. I don't think we have control over when that moment happens. We do have control over showing up, getting around people who are learning and growing and changing and doing the work. Lack of self-belief is another big one. And just like our person in the toxic relationship, when you're in toxic environments, you lose who you are and your confidence gets eroded. So then you're going to hesitate to make significant life changes because you're pretty worn down and beaten up. You could really doubt your ability to succeed or believe that you even deserve better. I know that sounds heavy, but that's true. Money. Money's a big obstacle for people. It's a significant factor in many of our decisions, of course. And so financial concerns can really hold you back from pursuing new opportunities or taking a risk. Like the one person I talked about who got out of corporate and went and started her own business. That was a big risk. That could have completely flopped on her, and it didn't, which is good. She took responsibility and worked part-time to pay the rest of the bills. Another one we don't talk about enough is loss of relationships. So a lot of people fear losing the support of the connections they have in their current situation. And this often occurs when you're leaving unhealthy situations or unhealthy relationships or changing careers. Healthy people want you to do your thing and be happy. They're going to support a calculated risk, right, that you take responsibility for. They don't want you to be miserable. Unhealthy people are going to feel very threatened, perhaps, by you changing and growing, because deep down they know if they don't change and grow, you're going to need better, which is true. And they're not going to let you do anything they haven't yet done for themselves. Regret is a big obstacle. The fear of regretting a decision, especially if you have self-esteem issues already and you have problems getting off the fence and making decisions and trusting yourself enough to make a decision, because you're going to worry that you'll make a change and later wish that you hadn't. It's like we want our cake and eat it too. That's why I think it is a process getting ready to do this. And 90% of the work is before you even make a move. Lots of talking and processing and journaling and working through it with people. Healthy people giving you mirroring around the whole situation. What are the advantages of making this change? What are the disadvantages? What if you don't? What are the consequences of staying where you are? If you can even do that. Overwhelm. The sheer scale of change required can feel really overwhelming because when people look at their goals, they may feel daunted by the work ahead and then they procrastinate. Yeah, I'll start that in January. Yeah, I'll start that in June. They don't think they can even do it. And that's why, again, we can't do this work alone. We need support. We need at least a couple of people around us. Sometimes we need a coach to kick our butt and structure the work that we do. I know my coach is awesome about helping me find structure in the overwhelm. So like getting this course put together and putting it out there was a lot of moving parts. And without her help, I don't know if I could have done it that quickly. We need people who have expertise that we don't, experience that we don't, encouragement that's bigger than our fear. Okay. The other thing is emotional attachment, and you could work at a really horrible job and still grieve leaving it. We can become emotionally attached to our current situations, even if they're awful. The thought of leaving something that we've invested time and energy into, that's a big one. Oh boy. People putting all this money into education and a career or a marriage, let's say, or a home. Maybe their home has become too big for them or too expensive, but it's hard to let it go. And family independence. So our responsibilities to our family or our dependents can create hesitations, right? because we want to make sure that there aren't negative impacts on our loved ones. And that's something I sit with clients around all the time. Like, there's that big difference between hurt and harm. Is your partner going to be frustrated when you go back to school because they got to pick up some more work at the house? Yeah. Is it going to kill them? No. There's a lot of negotiating there with your partner, let's say, around if you change careers, financially, how is that going to impact the family? And what can we figure out? Addressing these fears and these hesitations is a huge part of the work when you're looking at making a significant life change. We have to acknowledge the fear. We have to grab support. We start with the staircase, but like Martin Luther King said, don't look at the whole thing. Look at the next steps. We back it down from the goal and see what our first steps are and then what our next steps are. We have to gradually expose ourselves to change, I think, in order to make it doable and real. Otherwise, we're just going to say screw it and walk away. We won't do it. The process of change can really be challenging, but I think looking at the emotional barriers that we talked about today is really important. I think it's important to get it normalized. So no, you're not crazy, and no, you're not the only one. And guess what? There's some universality to this stuff. I think that helps. I don't think we talk about that enough. I say it here all the time on the show. If you break your arm, God forbid, but the doctor's going to tell you what to expect, what time frame you're looking at for healing, what things to do and what not to do, so that you aren't afraid when things happen. You're like, oh, okay, they told me, right, that there was going to be some swelling. I don't need to be afraid. They told me to elevate it. They told me to take this medicine to rest. But we don't do this enough in personal growth. I think we need to normalize some things. So let's talk about next steps. Let's say it's coming up on you to make a big change. You feel a little overwhelmed, a little freaked out. What do you do with that? Because everyone looks at me and says, Mary, where do I even begin? So here are some steps to kind of break it down a little bit. First things first, self-reflection. You got to get clear with what's going on. Think about what you truly want in life. Even if it's not specific, don't get caught up in specifics yet. I want to be happier. I want to be healthier. I want to be less stressed. I want more adventure. Just write that down. Then I want you to think about your passions and your values and your beliefs. What were some of your long-term goals before? I mean, some of them might carry forward. When you're reflecting, you want to ask yourself, what aspects of my life need to change and why? Be honest about your motivations. And then I really want you to sit and write, what will happen if you don't make changes? And I want you to be real, like really real. I want you to write it down, or better yet, if you have the kahunas to share with someone safe, you can share with them things like, look, I realize that if I don't get my health together, I could have a stroke. I could get diabetes. I could have heart issues. I could have lots of things. I could lose a lot of my mobility. I won't be healthy enough to chase my kids around when I have them. Really get real about the consequences. You don't have to be dramatic. You often don't have to be. They're consequences, the real ones, are dramatic in and of themselves, aren't they? They're serious business. It's hard when you're like 25 to kind of worry about that stuff, perhaps. Maybe you're not 25, and maybe you're starting to feel it. What if you don't get out of that toxic relationship? What if you don't finally do the work that you love? Write down, talk about, get real about the consequences. Take your time. Don't brush this aside. Don't rush through it. You have to sit with that, because what's going to happen in your brain is you're going to weigh out all your fears and oh my gods, and I can't do this, and what if I'm crazy, to what if I don't? And that might get your butt off the couch and get you ready to be ready to get ready to do it. Again, a process. So then let's say you do decide you want to be healthier, you would set some clear goals, right? Break these big goals down to small, manageable, doable steps that you can actually envision yourself doing. And this is all part of this plan that you set out. Give yourself a while. Like depending on, like grad school is like 2 years, right? If you want to lose a ton of weight, you're looking at a year. Get some accountability around you. It should not be your partner, by the way. Please don't do that. They don't want to be that person. They can love and support you, but they shouldn't be your accountability person, because then they start parenting you. And then we got a whole nother podcast episode just to talk about that. I don't recommend it. Get someone else outside of that. It could be a mentor, a coach, a support group, a friend, right, that you regularly check in with and tell them the truth. Being accountable helps. It helps us keep motivated. It helps to be bigger than our fear. And it helps us to not isolate and put things by the wayside. And then write down your wins. It's really important to write down your wins and talk to them with people, because when you're in it, you can't see it. I know I can't see my progress. It's really helpful when someone outside of me says, wow, Mara, look at that. I'm like, oh yeah, look at that. I was so busy. I was in the weeds, right? I didn't see the progress. And we need to know, and our brain needs to know there's progress, because it needs to know this is a good idea, right? You get it. This is also why I built the course, because we need structure. And it really helps to have the structure and the support and the coaching in there to work on you. And within that course, there are pieces about what are you passionate about? What are your gifts? What do you really want to do with your life now that you're becoming different? So today we delved into what I think is an essential topic of recognizing when it's time for a big change. We talked about the signs and the indicators that might be telling you it's time to take a bold step towards personal growth and a more fulfilling life. From feeling unfulfilled and trapped in your current situation to maybe persistent stress, our conversation shed the light on some of the cues that often go unnoticed. Then we talked about some real-life stories of people who recognized these signs and successfully navigated their journeys. We walked through the importance of self-reflection, goal setting, getting real, and getting a plan. Then we looked at what are some of the common fears and hesitations that hold people back from embracing change, and what are things that you can do to tackle them. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode gave you some valuable insights and maybe some tips to recognize the signs and take action, or if you're already in it, to help you keep going. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and to the newsletter if you want all the updates on some cool things I have coming up. Go grab the course in the show notes. If you have any questions, I return every message and every email. Please message me. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.